everybody. This is Treya here, and I am here with my wonderful children, Lau and Treya. Say hi. So, Lau and Treya, we're getting into this repetitive argument that was really annoying and making the house tense. And I said to them, could you guys do something different? Because I don't like the tension anymore. And they did. So after they both excitedly came to me and said that they had shifted and found a resolution, I said, I bet there are other people in the world who are arguing and finding it challenging and would like to do it differently. Could you come live with me and share what you did? And they said yes. So, Lau and Treya, maybe we could start with what you were doing wrong when you were arguing and how it was making you feel. Do you want to start, Treya?
I mean, sure. I think because they would always start as just like normal discussions about topics, about anything and everything. And with the ones where me and Lau would have like completely conflicting views, like I guess how it was being attacked and like I wasn't because with my dyslexia I really struggle with sometimes like thinking and words and processing what like I'm wanting to say and how to say it, and that can be really challenging for me. So it just like I would normally end up feeling very angry, frustrated, not heard, and like I would like a lot of the time I'd like try and hold in my tears, but normally like 5 minutes, and I would just be like still going at it whilst crying, because that's when I get angry. That's how, or frustrated. That's how it comes out.
And how was it for you, Lau? So first, Treya, I really appreciate you sharing vulnerably and sharing how frustrating it is, and also how hard it is with dyslexia to follow a conversation, especially when somebody speaks as fast as Lau does, and also uses language or vocabulary that sometimes I have to go, sorry, what are you actually saying? It's not easy to argue with Lau because he has a very different brain to what you do. Whereas you like telling stories, Lau often likes intense facts. So, Lau, how was it for you having this constant argument with Treya?
So, because I've spent quite a few years going to debating tournaments and debating clubs, model UNs and public speaking tournaments and things along those lines, I
Maybe
very
come
much
a bit closer, babe, because I can't hear you quite as well as I could before we tested.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
So because I spent so long going to all these debating tournaments and things along those lines, I was kind of taught a very specific style of debating, a very specific style of conversing. I was taught that you're given your position, you argue for that position like it's a fact and a certainty, and the second you leave the room, you and the opposition both laugh about it because neither of you agree with the slightest what you were saying. I was taught it's just about arguing your case as hard as you can and aggressive as you can until the opponent's overwhelmed and you've beaten them. And that mindset took a lot to overcome. And while I was still in that mindset, having any debate with me, I'd string long logical sentences that sounded very good and sounded very clever with lots of very, very, very big words that weren't particularly easy to understand, but would just make it look like I'm smart, because that's what I was taught to do. And that what didn't result in anything constructive. During these debates with Treya, I ended up feeling, in the same way that she felt like I wasn't listening, I felt the exact same thing, because I felt like she wasn't listening to what I was saying. And then it felt like I was just repeating the exact same string, and she just wasn't hearing it. She would then respond with her original point, and I'd say, I've already responded to that and explained why that's incorrect. You haven't responded to what I've just said. You've just said what you originally said with no difference in the slightest. And then that would happen again and again and again, and it wouldn't lead anywhere. It wouldn't be constructive. It wouldn't grow. I'd end up getting more and more angry and pissed off because it felt like she wasn't listening to the things that I was telling her. And then she would end up getting more and more and more and more angry and pissed off, as I was getting more and more angry and pissed off, and would just build up and up and up and up and up till we were both completely exploding, completely infuriated, and can't do anything constructive, can't hear each other and can't understand each other.
Yeah, and to be around that was excessively stressful, because they would just start shouting at each other and speaking in very different ways, and then they would both come to me, Treya crying, Lau angry at how infuriating the discussion was, because neither of them felt fulfilled or heard. And so, you know, because we are all neurodiverse, we all have different ways of communicating that often irritate each other, because it contradicts or it goes against, it feels, we can sometimes feel allergic to how the other person's communicating. So Treya, for dyslexia, we didn't discuss talking about this, but maybe you're happy to. For dyslexia, how is it that you tend to communicate, and how does Lau's style of communication kind of piss you off?
I guess, like, one way, are you talking a bit in like discussions / debates / arguments?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess like with Lau, when it's going on, because like he shared like a long string of using big words and intelligent, and it just like goes right over my head. I physically can't comprehend it. Also because it's so much at once, it's so much information. And like how he shared, he gets frustrated because I just repeat the same argument, because it feels like he's not hearing my argument. I'm really struggling to process what like Lau's saying. So then I just repeat my like an argument that I've shared before, because it doesn't feel like it's getting heard. Like, and it's like you're not understanding what I'm saying. But then like a lot of the time it's like, you've already said this before, and then it's
so
like,
what would you need to feel like he was listening to you?
Not to be attacked.
Yeah.
I think that's probably.
And what would you need instead of being attacked, for you to feel like, oh, he's got the point, I don't need to repeat it again?
Well, I guess that's sort of going into like the next section.
Okay, so let's first ask Lau about the neurodiverse bit, and then we'll go on to the next section. Lau, what is it? How is it that you communicate, and how is the information that you want based on your autism, ADHD brain?
With my brain, it sometimes feels like it's moving incredibly quickly, to the point where my words can't keep up with it, and it's very difficult. For me, the ideal way of someone communicating is by speaking as quickly as possible, and with a long form, direct, logical, clear statement that's simple for me to go here, then here, then here. This follows this, which follows this, which follows this, which follows this. Therefore, this. That format is by far the easiest and simplest for me. That makes everything simple to understand, simple to digest, and simple to know. That's the format that I tend to think in, and the one that I tend to communicate in, and the one that I'm used to. The one that I was taught to do when writing philosophy essays.
But
for me, a lot of the time when I'm thinking, I think out loud. So I talk through all my thoughts. So like my first thing that I say normally isn't what I actually think or believe, but I have to carry on talking, and then but I feel like quite a lot of the time I'm cut off before I'm able to finish the thought process, so I'm not able to actually
because you don't have
sometimes happen when with me and Treya in this situation. She would have started saying something, and I would have already used the autistic pattern recognition thing to have already figured out the conclusion and already figured out a list of all the counter arguments to that conclusion. And so then I'd say, okay, I've got it, and then she'd immediately start saying the counter arguments. And she doesn't even realize the point that she's getting to that I've already noticed. So then it's just like, whoa, what? And it makes no sense.
So I guess you're arguing a thought that I hadn't even gotten to. So then I guess I get like stuck on like the last or one of the last like thoughts I had because like I hadn't finished like the thought process.
Yes, and I think it's really hard for folk who have ADHD, autism, because you can see patterns and you generally think ahead of what people are going to say. Whereas with dyslexia, you're a lot more feeling orientated and noticing undercurrents and then trying to describe it in a story. And the stories take longer to get to, whereas the autistic or ADHD person has got to the conclusion already, and then they're just chomping at the bit and irritated. So I'm curious how you both regulated to get to a place where you could hear each other. Sorry, we didn't talk about saying that, but I'm sure you could talk about that.
I mean, I feel like again that comes a little bit later after we've already explained the strategies. That's just going to be discussed as we carry on with the next.
So do you want to explain what you did differently, Lau?
Sure. So there is a very, very alternative style of debating that is far more effective and far more efficient. I was first introduced to by watching the movie 12 Angry Men. And this movie basically is going over...
Can you talk a bit slower and come closer?
Sure. The movie is called 12 Angry Men and is an excellent black and white 50s, 60s movie. The premise is that we have 12 jurors who are there for a murder trial. One of them thinks the person might be innocent, that there's just a chance. Everyone else thinks they're definitely guilty. And the movie shows that one juror, as he slowly convinces every single other one, all the different strategies he has to use, all the different methods, how some it's through alienation, some it's through calm, quiet words, some it's through emotional appeal, some it's through turning the group against them by pointing out the flaws of what they're saying, to the point where peer pressure just forced them to agree with it. But it was doing very, very careful and curated styles of argument for each specific person to convince them, and in the end he did. And that was my first introduction to a more Socratic style of thinking, a style of debating more focused on asking the other person questions pointed at the fact of getting them to come to the conclusion that you came to, but not just by telling them and giving away the answer, but instead by asking guided specific questions for them to more get. And that is partially what I did, but not what I did in totality. The main thing I kind of figured was I don't understand the axiom, the primary belief, the fundamental premise behind what my sister's saying. So instead of starting out by just asserting what I believe and what I think and what I feel, I instead started to ask her the origins of her viewpoints, where they came from, their origins, how they made her feel, what they were about. And eventually I realized the fundamental cause of her ideology in this situation comes from the fact that she saw many people express a strong emotional perspective. So then, instead of thinking of the logical ways that I can disagree with her, I started thinking of the other potential emotional perspectives that could more suit her style of thinking and her style of that. So then I started to explain the other perspectives that you can look at that also lead to a similar emotional feeling, but in the opposite side, and the nuances of the entire topic that we were discussing. And once I started doing it like that, of carefully analyzing the way she thinks and curating every single one of my arguments directly to what she needs to hear, to what will actually convince her, rather than convincing the logical AI god that exists somewhere, then what things started to get through. Then we stopped both shouting and crying and all that stuff. Then we started
I was still crying though, because that's how I get in intense situations. Yeah. But it wasn't it wasn't as like bad as it like normally would have been in like these types of discussions. It was a lot like I was able to think clearly. Yeah.
And then instead of spending an hour arguing and shouting at each other, instead there were multiple points in that conversation I was like, ooh, this idea could work as a counter argument. I'm not sure if it will, but do you just want to follow along with this one, see where it goes? It might lead nowhere, it might work, just out of curiosity because it's quite interesting. And where we slowly potentially figured out all the ways it could work. And then that one may not have even worked. So then it's like, okay, let's just dismiss that, ignore that one, try a different one. And exploring it carefully together, looking at the range of ideas, looking at the way both of our brains think in different ways, and seeing that as a strength rather than a weakness, instead of going, oh, you're not being logical enough, you're not thinking in the right way, instead of going, well, I can't just snap my fingers and make Treya think in a logical way. That's how she is. I can't change her. Let's start thinking about the best way to appeal to her as an individual. And that shifted the entire thing.
And I think what also helped was that you had like more of the mindset of like, oh, I don't want to win this. I'm not trying to win like my argument. I want to like more. So like, because we were basically on like completely different ends. Yes, we still don't agree with everything because like we're different people, but we like managed to find like a more gray area of where like we can be like, okay, we agree with this set different like stuff.
Yeah, and there's a video going around with Esther Perel who says that as soon as you are going into a polarity in an argument, then the other person has to find the opposite polarity. And if you both stand and fight that polarity, there's no connection and it separates you. So the more you can say, well, I feel this and I feel a bit of what you feel. Oh, well, I feel this and a bit of what you feel too. Then there's more connection and you're able to establish a common ground. So I just want to repeat, La, the things that I think that you guys, and what you said, Treya, is that you said that you shifted out of trying to win the debate and you went into, or win the argument, and you went into being curious about each other's perspective. You tried to establish common ground instead of making them wrong for either being a logical or an emotional thinker. You tried to understand how to communicate in the way that the other person was communicating so that they could hear you.
Yeah. And then when Lau would share like his like arguments for it, I was more able to, my mind was more clear and less bombarded. I was able to say like, oh, okay, I agree with this part of your argument, but I don't agree with this part, and that's why. And so then we were able to like communicate way better.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think the other thing that we said earlier was also talking about like what you both valued as a core value rather than just trying to be right.
So this came because of the fact that I was recently discussing a theory in meta-ethics called value pluralism, which basically states that in our moral ideologies, we have a variety of things that we value. It might be integrity, it might be generosity, it might be whatever. And you can't objectively prove that one of those things is more important than the other. They are all equally valuable. It's just a subjective choice of which one you choose. You can't objectively claim any form of objectionality exists. So I started to apply that more to the way I was thinking with my discussion with Treya. If I instead of thinking that the thing that she's valuing in this conversation is as equally important to what I'm valuing, so let's pay attention to what she's valuing and make arguments based around that.
That makes complete sense. Okay, I'm going to press enter of all the things that I have noticed you guys did. Treya, how did allow shifting how he was treating you impact you?
Well, I guess like I still I still felt, because he was asking about like the emotions I was feeling instead of sort of like just trying to override them with logic, I was actually able to figure out why I was feeling that way, because like normally in like previous discussions that turn into arguments, I would just like, the emotions would just feel so overwhelming. And like, so then with like this latest like discussion, because Lau was being curious, I was able to actually figure out why I was feeling like those emotions, and it's, oh, okay, it makes sense. And like, I know with autism, you can feel emotions a lot more strongly and not know where they are from. So yeah, it was helpful to be able to do that. What was the question?
How did it feel for Lau to shift how he was treating you?
It also helped me to like understand more about why I thought like my arguments and like why I felt like so strongly about them. And it felt like way more calmer and like we were each respecting each other a lot more. And we were able to explore it so more deeply than we've ever been able to explore any arguments and discussions in the past. And it was like I really enjoyed the conversation. Like it was like yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And it sounds like the way that Lau treated you in that conversation actually led you to understanding yourself more rather than just defending what you were trying to say that would make you quite rigid and repetitive. Like it actually took you deeper into yourself. And what was Lau doing that helped that?
Oh yeah, he was just being curious. And then he would help, I guess, by then like I would sort of share like what I was feeling and stuff, and then I guess he would turn it into logic and be like, so you're feeling like this because of this, and this. Yeah.
And then put that on the string of the way that I like to think and understand information, confirm that that is correct. Not in a way of, so you're saying, and then going into a massive saying of why they're wrong, but more just, this is what we mean, like this. And I'm going, okay, I can understand that, and then carrying on. Just so,
I just
ensuring clarity was something that we were doing the entire way through to make sure that we're both on the same page for each thing. We're both having the same assumptions going into it, so we weren't having parallel conversations about different things because we didn't realize that we both had different definitions for the words we were using.
And now, one thing about ADHD that you and I both have is interrupting randomly because we feel our point is more important than what the other person is saying. And then it leaves the other person feeling frustrated, unmet, unheard, violated, etc., etc., etc. What did you do to manage yourself so you weren't imposing and dominating?
Well, the thing is, the thought I had is more interesting.
But of course, Lau, everything you say is more interesting than anybody else.
I didn't really do anything to prevent that. I think I still did that. But I just think because everything else was a lot better, then that ADHD trait didn't affect Treya as severely as it would have otherwise. It didn't feel like I was interrupting her anymore. It more just felt like I was contributing to the conversation, from my perspective at least. It didn't feel like I was saying that to dismiss what she said, but I was trying to share an idea that she would find interesting as well, I think.
And also, I think in like outside of like when we would have had like the heated like discussions, Lau often would be like, know what you're gonna say already, like just at the start of like a sentence I say. So I'm already quite used to him doing that anyway. Like, and it like of course it still feels like gulp, okay. I don't really know what I was gonna say, but you already do. So I guess like I'm sort of used to that happening.
And used to the fact that when that happens, I do tend to be right. Not always, but most of the time. I mean, when I go, I already know what you're going to say. Most of the time I have predicted it correctly.
Yeah, you can generally see patterns and intuit what somebody's going to say, but it's annoying when somebody goes, I know what you're going to say, so you don't need to speak.
Oh, I can imagine it's ridiculously annoying.
Yes.
But then also I also understand that it's annoying for Lau as well, because it's like, well, I'm bored of this. Like, I know what you're going to say. You're taking so long to say it. There's no point in you saying it because I already have the answer or what I want to respond to it.
So often what will happen in the conversation is in the first 10 seconds of someone's 5-minute point, I would have already figured out the entire point. So I just kind of sit there for 5 minutes waiting for them to finish so I can finally say what I want to say when I knew what they're saying the entire way through it. And that becomes incredibly frustrating.
Really frustrating.
And the thing that I also have to the thing that I also had to acknowledge there was some people, the way I kind of saw it was, you know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say. Why the fuck do you need to say it? That's simple, right? But for Treya specifically, and she said this, she often doesn't know what she's going to say when I do. And often it's the process of that talking that is useful for her. So it's vital that I need to leave her to do that and can't interrupt her in that way. When with some others, it might be okay to do.
Yes, if you're talking to somebody else who's autistic or ADHD and thinks quickly and thinks in patterns, they're fine to interrupt and add deeper patterns. But with somebody with dyslexia, who is a verbal processor and needs to, like for Treya, she doesn't have a working memory. And so a short-term working memory. And so she can't hold the layers of thinking in one go. So she needs to process verbally to think through all the different options. And when she starts speaking, it might sound illogical or not, random. And then she finally gets, if she's left to it, gets to the answer of what she's trying to. But it takes a lot of holding and patience and understanding different brains. Like she will go in details about random things because she's picking up like details and atmosphere about something, whereas La's really logical and just gets to the points. And to manage both of those, it takes a lot of patience, curiosity, and holding space, because they have very different ways of communicating and very different ways that their brains work. And often we project onto other people that our brain works like this, so your brain will work like this too. But in reality, especially with neurodivergent people, we need to understand each other.
Just add that little bit there.
Huh?
Can I add a little bit you said there?
Yeah, but come forward a bit. And if anybody's listening, you're welcome to ask questions in the comments, and I'll be able to see and ask Treya and La if you have a question.
So the bit that Mom mentioned there makes perfect sense. The presumption that because our brains work one way, everyone else's brains will also work that same way. And the reason that makes perfect sense is because the only brain we have access to is our own. So to assume that other people even think, we assume they think in the way we think because we've only ever seen that way of thinking. We aren't aware of the right. We can't exist within their minds. We can't feel their emotions. So because of that, it does feel like the most logical thing to just assume, oh, they're just like me, because the only case of minds working I've seen works like mine, so they all should. I've seen one white goose, so all geese are white. It's that kind of logic. It's flawed, but it makes perfect sense, particularly with neurodiverse people.
But one thing I quite enjoy though is like when Lau gets like ill or something like that, and his brain isn't working properly, and he's really struggling to talk, and he's stumbling over words and stuff, and it's like that's me on a daily basis. So then I think like him experiencing that when he's like sick or something like that, he's like, oh, okay, I can understand more of how your brain like mind functions on.
And the other slight perspective shift that really helped me was when Treya was doing those things that really annoyed me, when she was repeating the same exact word many times when I'd already addressed it. I then realized, or I might have even said this, that I think it's annoying for me, imagine how annoying it is for Treya. And the second I did that, I suddenly realized it's bloody selfish of me that just because I'm a little bit annoyed by that means that I can act like that. Slight annoyance is more than her constant daily struggle with this thing that is so much higher to me feel about this. And I'm just making her feel worse about that rather than helping her in any way. I'll be far, 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 far more constructive if instead I do just hold space and patience for her.
That's really beautiful. That makes me a bit teary. And it also makes me think of clients who have been brought up in homes where somebody was abusive if you spoke up or if you used your voice. And so people can get really scared of sharing. And so if you have somebody who fumbles over their words, finds it really hard to speak, it's really worth holding space and being patient, especially for those people, to try and find their voice and being pretty spacious how you're listening, because when somebody first starts to find their voice, they often can say the wrong thing. They can be more polarized because they're trying to find their voice, and it just takes spaciousness to go, yeah, you're being a bit extreme or a bit catastrophic or a bit off in how you're communicating, but I want you to find your voice. I'm going to be patient and hold space for that because it was really scary for you to find your voice in childhood. And so many of us have just struggled. But in our home, we used to take turns every dinner time to listen and look at how is your thinking happening so that we have understanding for each other. And I don't think a lot of families necessarily do that. But we've explored a lot together. How do our brains function differently so we have more empathy for each other? And I think that makes a massive difference because then we're holding space to be able to find our voice given the neurodivergency that we have.
And then also for other people, like Laos has shared before, like when he's talking to someone who is like dyslexic and stuff. And because like I know I talk a lot slower and stuff, and like all of the other stuff we've shared. And he's like, he has so much more understanding for like those people, and he has a lot more patience because he's had to have a lot more patience with me. And so like because we all have different communication styles, it's helped us all like with other people to be able to be like, okay, we need to be patient with you. You just have like, yeah.
And when I was in that conversation, I was thinking that if I can rationally convince Treya of something like this, then I can do that to many, many other people who think in the same style that she does, because there is a slight divide in people between thinking in a more logical and emotional way. And the more we can access both of those things simultaneously, using arguments that both are looking at more emotional sides of things and addressing those and understanding those, and also looking at things in a logical way and combining the two things, creating a thesis between them. Doing that is far, far more productive and far more useful. So I was thinking that this will show me how to convince people like her of something like that, and will be such a useful skill going forward in the future. And I've had people who are dyslexic compliment my style of communication with them because of my sister entirely.
It makes a massive difference. And I think that, when we're learning to speak, I'm just going to repeat for those of you who just are coming that the things that they said that they shifted out of was being right, talking at each other versus with each other. And they shifted into being curious, finding common ground, understanding that one of them was talking more logically and one of them was talking more emotionally, and try to access and understand rather than saying, well, you shouldn't be talking about feelings, or you shouldn't, it's not just all about what you think and the theory. Both matter. Instead of trying to win and be right, actually shifting out of polarity and finding the gray and the paradox of where you agree, what is the common ground there, and part of that is exploring the values. And we've spoken a lot about neurodiversity here, and in the program that I'm going to be running from Friday for anybody who's wanting more skills around this, I'll put the link at the bottom. It's restoring.love/RRR live. I'm going to be doing the resourcing you to respond and repair course. And there is a section on that about how neurodiverse people speak differently and how to be able to, Treya and Lau have obviously grown up with a therapist for a mum, and we talk about feelings and emotions and how to hold space for each other a lot. They have learned the steps to empathy. They've learned the steps to apology. They've learned the regulation tools. And these are all the things that we teach in this program, so that they are.
And we had this at like a really, really young child when we were like even 4 or 5, where we so desperately did not want to learn any of this, where we could not be. I remember saying to Mom, why do I need to learn 7 steps to apology when everyone else can just say, I'm sorry and that's okay? I want to be able to do that. And then she said, do you want to be like everyone else? And that quite quickly shut me up. But we did not want to learn this. Now I'm so, so, so grateful that we have. Because it makes every day people so, so much easier.
How have the skills of like empathy, apology, regulation, and like, so resourcing, you're self-regulating, responding, empathy, holding space, and repairing when you get it wrong. How have those helped you in your relationships?
For me, it's allowed me to have far more space for people. And it also particularly means that it's allowed me to have far longer relationships. Because when I fuck up, I now have the skills to identify where I was wrong, empathize with the other person, apologize for what I did, and repair for it in a way that genuinely meets them so the relationship can survive. And if I didn't have that skill, I would have so far fewer close friendships and relationships than I have now.
Yeah. And what about you, Treya? How does that help you?
I think it has helped me to be more emotionally attuned, and but I guess like already with like the people pleasing side that was programmed into me, that's already quite a big part of it. But I think like being a people pleaser and then having like emotional like attunement and stuff can be quite very different, because I guess like for me, people pleasing I guess is more on the surface level. Morning will be like hi, let's keep everything calm and everything. But when it's more emotionally attuned, it's more like grounded, calm, and like you're able to explore everything in so much more depth than just more surface level stuff, which means you have a lot more richer conversations and less superficial conversations.
That makes complete sense. So in the resourcing you to respond and repair training that starts on Friday, we're going to be looking at regulation tools. We're going to look at how to express yourself in a way to get your needs met. We're going to look at how to respond to somebody that makes them feel better and enables them to express themselves fully. How to repair when we get things wrong. So if you are estranged or you are in conflict. And then we're also going to look at how to grow your connection with other people so you can deepen more love. And so all of that training is already created. So the moment you sign up, you're able to access it. And then next week, I'll be answering your personal questions on what are the struggles that you have and the conflicts that you have in your home. And if there's stuff to do with teenagers or kids, I'm sure my kids would be happy to do a Zoom call on how I have parented or what are the struggles. Yola, what do you want to say?
And I'll just furthering that point, if there's anything specifically that me and Treya have experienced and understand, because there are some things that we do understand better than Mom, because they are our direct lived experience. And with Mom, it's just analysis and awareness of someone else's lived experience. So there are times we'll be able to do those things better or slightly worse. And we would both be completely happy to do that on a large range of things.
Yeah, you know, Treya's created some videos and I shared it with my membership, and some people even said they preferred watching her videos to mine. So same tools. She was teaching the same tools that I was teaching, and they said it was nicer to listen to her than it was to listen to me. So Treya and I are really happy to come in and do, you know, we're happy to talk about, because, you know, they lived with me having complex PTSD and the struggles with that. And so if you are somebody who has been a parent who has had complex PTSD, possibly your kids are estranged or you don't have a relationship with your adult children because of that, we'd be really happy to talk about the challenges of when I was suicidal and how we've repaired that, how I've had to sit with my kids and work through the impact of having a mum who has complex PTSD and how we all manage that and manage all our neurodiversity together. So we'd be really happy to do that in the week. Is there anything else you want to share before we end about arguments, responding and repairing before we go?
I think one of like, which has been obviously shared before, is like, I think one of the most important things is like knowing, okay, some of the stuff we aren't going to agree on. That's okay. But the most important thing is coming together and finding the stuff that you both agree on, and like being understanding and exploring it. And I think that is the main thing that made such a big difference for us.
I think that the biggest thing, and I wrote about this in an email today, is that every single conflict is only arising because there's something that people care about underneath it. And if you're just getting into loggerheads about the conflict, you're not actually capturing what each of you care about. And the thing that they realized in their argument that stopped it is actually tuning into what matters to each person.
There were multiple moments. There were multiple moments in that argument where I just straight up said, "Oh wait, I don't care about this in the absolute slightest. I can't be bothered to talk about this. If you want to carry on, let's talk about it." And what is quite funny is sometimes the reason that I'm having those conversations and debates is because I just enjoy the process rather than care about the conclusion. And that's the thing that I care about of why I'm doing it rather than the actual topic. Sometimes.
Yes, because you just like debating.
What?
But then, because like I'm not a debater, I'm shit at debating. As like yeah. So then when we would start those discussions, it would just be horrific for me because it just felt like I was being completely attacked. And yeah, and it's funny because we had like the discussion as an argument a few days before, then a few days later Lau like brought it up again, and it was like, oh wow, this is one of the conversations we've had in such a long time. It's so fascinating seeing. I don't know if I've gone off or not because my thing's loading.
No, I can still hear you.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I forgot my point.
In the middle of a thing after we've had this conversation so many times.
Hang on, I couldn't hear that. Could you repeat what you said?
We were talking
Come
about
forward, Lau.
we'd recently had this conversation twice in a row.
Lau, come forward and speak slower.
No, I can hear him. It's just because you were doing something over, so I couldn't hear what he had said.
Okay. So you were saying about how we'd had that conversation twice in a row. I went out of my way to bring it up, and you're like, oh, okay. Well, we're probably talking about this again. This was some adjective conversation we've had in a long time. Like something like that. Does that help?
I don't really know. I think it was so fascinating to see how, like, I guess his approach completely changed, and so then the discussion just completely changed because it's been years.
Either I will fully come to a conclusion that we both agree with now, or I'll never have this conversation with her again.
And because we've had, like, it's not like just that specific like discussion we've had. It's like most of our discussions that have turned into arguments, like, but now because I guess like Lau clicked of, oh, this is why I do it in this way, and it doesn't really work. Now it's like, okay, we can like put that into when we have discussions again, so that then they don't turn into arguments, and then neither of us feel met or like good at the end, because it just feels pretty shit of like, oh yeah, and it's like, well, I'll never want to speak to you again about this topic because there's no point. But
yes,
now like, we can.
I just wonder if I can take that point, and I was just thinking, Lau, part of why before debating you were like that is that you were bullied quite strongly and it made you fight back. Yeah. Whereas Treya was excluded and bullied and it made her lose her voice. Mm-hmm. And so it made Treya more scared to speak up and made her more anxious. And so in order for... Huh?
while making me more aggressive and harsh. Because the other thing I was also taught, both from bullying and from debating, is that you need to carefully interweave insults throughout all the points that you're making, just to truly dominate and prove that you're better than them.
Yes, yes. And so when you're going into an argument to win and prove you're better than them, it disconnects your heart from who you're speaking to, and they feel violated and unmet.
And disconnected themselves, because it's like, well, this just isn't feeling like connected.
Yes. And so it made a big difference, like you shifting your whole attitude to talking with Treya, caring for her heart and making sure she felt valued in the conversation. And for Treya, in doing that, you didn't have to repeat yourself. You didn't have to fight to be heard because he was genuinely caring. And then you didn't repeat yourself as often. Because you were being validated. So you didn't have to fight to be heard because he was giving you the space to be able to do that.
Mm.
So somebody's written, I can only see Facebook use, I can't actually see who it is, said, I relate with Treya a lot while appreciating Zaria for your knowledge. I feel her people-pleasing and overwhelm from emotions that leads to disconnecting. I find you amazing as a family and able to find common ground and give space to each other. It's been a lot of work because all of us have had levels of bullying or exclusion or abuse, and also we all are neurodiverse in different ways. And so it's complex to give space to each other when we all are such different people. And we've had to really, really, really work on it and learn how to hold space for each other more. And we get it wrong, guaranteed every day. One of us will go, you didn't hear me, or you interrupted. But we are a lot more spacious and kind when we do it.
Yeah.
And
I think because we all have different sensory issues, we all have different ways to like that stim, like different stims that like other people find sensory overload. So a lot of the time it is just like, normally it will be ending up in shouting and then being like, right, we just have to go into different rooms because we can't be in the same space because our needs are different right now.
So first one being, I remember during the conversation, one of the first questions
Can
I
you
asked,
sit forward, babe?
Sorry. I remember during that conversation, one of the first questions that I asked Treya was, are you willing to change your mind on this issue? Because I wasn't really attached to my opinion. If I found strong arguments, I would have been happy to change my mind. But I wasn't sure if she would be willing to. So I flat out asked her and figured if she isn't willing to, I'll just say no. I'll just walk away because there's utterly no point. If you don't clarify that at the very, very beginning, that you're both happy to shift your perspective, if there is a credible reason to, then there's no point in ever having a debate or a conversation about a topic with anyone ever. Because at that point, you're talking to see who talks the loudest rather than anything else. That's completely redundant. And the other thing with what one was just saying about how we all make those mistakes every single day. But the thing that allows us to make those mistakes, the things that don't turn those mistakes into a daily argument or we're screaming at each other, is the fact that we're all fine with being wrong. And we all like being wrong, because being wrong means we can now be correct. Thank you for telling me you don't like this thing, because now I know you don't like this thing. So instead of feeling shame for not knowing in the first place, I should try and instead feel more appreciation that now I know that, and now going forward, I won't make that mistake again. Having that perspective helps us all a lot.
That makes so much sense. I know we said it was only going to be half an hour, and I hope that everybody can hear us okay, because we don't have Wi-Fi. So we are all on a different level of the house, and we're all on our own individual hotspots, and there's very shit data, mobile data here. So I apologize if the sound has been awful, but I hope that you've been able to hear us, and it's been fun to chat. Anything else you want to say before we go?
Thank you all for listening.
Yeah.
Oh. All right.
Yeah.
And I hope you'll come and join us in the Resourcing You to Respond and Repair course that starts on Friday. You have lifetime access to this. Probably like it's been a lifetime for me, or many, many years of deeply wanting to create this course because I'm estranged from my family, and these were the skills that I wish they had they done these tools with me of being more regulated, responding to me, and repairing, I would still have a connection with them. And the reason the three of us have just got such a beautiful relationship is because we do these every day. And so if you're wanting a deeper, more beautiful connection, whatever age your children are, this course is beautiful and so worth doing together. And next week, I'll be answering all your individual questions so that you feel met and supported in growing these skills. All right, everybody, sending you all so much love, and send me a message if you've got any questions or any questions for Treya, and we might go live another day.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. I appreciate you and love you.